both in India and the United States, that when you inject fear into a society, then it really is sort of the beginning of the end. And it's very sad to see fear arrive in the United States, to find people scared of speaking their mind. I mean, I think that's one of the essential human rights, not just water, healthcare, food, but also freedom to live without fear. I'm not the person to ask about social media because I'm not on social media. Hello, I'm Kiran Desai and I'm here for KLF Apostrophes.
I read somewhere that you told that writer's block is not something very bad. Why?
Writer's block. I don't experience writer's block. Perhaps I don't call it writer's block. I don't use the term because for me it's a pleasant time of mulling things over. It's a creative time, a little bit of space to think things through, because ideas come popping out of nowhere sometimes. So that little bit of space, when the window's open, you're at your desk, you're working but not working, can be the most creative time of all.
Okay. I also read somewhere that if there is something missing, you can correct me, that writing something political and writing something creative are two entirely different things. And writing something political is easy compared to writing something creative or writing something literary, because the other thing is based on facts, but the other thing is based on our thoughts, our imagination, our thinking and art. How you differentiate between these two?
Well, I don't think you can keep politics out of a novel, but I think it has to be politics for the sake of your art, not the other way around. Talking of how political events, politics affects people, how it affects the family, how it affects the person, things change, how do we experience those changes. So it's always important to root it in that sphere. But it is true that in my last book was Inheritance of Loss. It was a very political book. It was about migration. It was about borders. And this time around, I decided to look at a story through the lens of a long, unresolved romance. And it was certainly more difficult to go into deep personal sphere and to write about, the most tender of longings, and to write about those personal conversations that only two people share. And not just the romantic ones, but also those profound relationships, conversations you have with important relationships, such as, talking to a parent at the time of their death. I mean, this is why we read literature. I really think this is the heart of the creative, of the artistic sphere. This is what we can do, what politicians can't, historians can't, and journalists can't.
Okay, a lot of for political reasons, America is in news for Zohran Mamdani, Trump's tariffs, Greenland threats, and Maduro capture. For everything, America is in news for all political reasons. So, what is your take on that? I will like to have your comment on Mamdani becoming New York mayor, and how it will how it will present a new political scenario for America.
It's very interesting. No, I think both elections point to discontent and polarization in the United States. And Zohran Mamdani, I should say, is my neighbor in that he lives in the neighboring borough. I live in Jackson Heights, which is a very immigrant neighborhood in New York City, and he lives in Astoria. He was living in Astoria until just recently, until he won the election. And what interests me about him is that in his campaign, he so much focused on the underprivileged. Those are the people who voted for him. That was his constituency. Talking of people who he felt had been left behind by the political process. And it wasn't even the middle class. He really spoke about the underprivileged. So, which made me respect him so much. Because as a novelist too, you are after those stories, and those are the people you want to talk to and write about. In New York City, at an Inheritance of Loss, I was talking about all of those people who come from all over the world, who work in the basement kitchens of Western countries. So he was talking about the Bangladeshi taxi drivers, the people who keep the city up and running, who work all night in the subway stops, and who've been left out of the wealth of the city, who are not acknowledged. And it's also very interesting to me that he was voted into office, and is perhaps also partly because he is willing to speak out against Trump. And he has the confidence of youth, maybe, and he's not afraid to say things. And so it is fascinating to have this debate now going on between the President of the United States and the Mayor of New York. I'm so glad he's there.
And when you're speaking right now, you told that you're living in a place where there are a lot of immigrants. And again, immigrants is a hot issue in America, not just in America, naturally in other countries also. And ICE is being in the news after that shooting incident in Minneapolis.
Yes.
So, how immigrants' life in America is changing now. From the hopes, have they shifted the focus of their life? Have shifted to fear, tension?
Yeah. So, because of where I live, a lot of what you read in the news, I see outside my window. And there was a huge influx of immigrants during the time of President Biden. A lot of them were sent up from Texas in buses to New York City. The neighborhood I live in was transformed by a surge of immigration. And then, of course, you saw the reaction against it in the election of Trump. And since then, a lot of the streets that were very vibrant, very busy, people selling tacos and other things to eat, bread, all these, families that were more newly arrived. Those streets are now quite silent and empty. And I've also seen, both in India and the United States, that when you inject fear into a society, then it really is sort of the beginning of the end. And it's very sad to see fear arrive in the United States, to find people scared of speaking their mind and scared to say something for fear they'll be stopped at immigration in the airport, scared to say something, say, for example, on behalf of Palestinian rights. So many students faced such a backlash.
And coming to talking about Palestine, Board of Peace that President Trump has suggested is another topic. I'm not going into that also. When it comes to India, when there is sharp criticism from scholars or writers or brilliant people, yes, they have been classified as urban exiles. So, but actually, last few days back in an election rally, PM Modi was really really clear about his stance on this urban exiles. Urban exiles means literally scholars, teachers, teachers, everybody is pointed out after that Bhima Korega means. So how you look issues like this?
What can I say? I'm seeing this play out in the United States right now, where I am now a citizen, of scholars being targeted and universities being targeted, and always in governments that are moving towards control, or moving in this way towards, nationalism, moving towards control, moving towards authoritarianism. Of course, they always go after universities, and they go after journalists, and they go after artists, and they go after writers. And it's always quite strange, because on one hand, one's being told that art is on the periphery and that people don't read anymore, and then yet all of a sudden it becomes, you see that, all right, that writers are actually, if it were true, then writers would not be targeted in this way. So I think it's very important. What can I say? That it's important for us to stand in solidarity with writers who are being targeted, and to really uphold free speech. we have to be, it seems so pathetic and hard to put up your hand and say human rights, but we have to do it.
Yes, and are you hopeful that this phase of complete antagonism against free opinion, criticism, or a debate, will it be over? Will good days come back?
Who's to say, I feel as if there are windows, as I said, I think once fear takes root, it becomes a very difficult game. Once people are too scared to speak, it becomes a very difficult game. And of course, I always hope that things will change, because we remember better days when people weren't scared, I think that's one of the essential human rights, not just water, healthcare, food, but also freedom to live without fear. That should be a basic human right. So I hope things change, but there's no knowing, right? There are countries where things never change.
Fear is not at all good for any society.
Huh?
Fear is not at all good for any society. So again, this fear, the tensions that you see around you, how it affects you as a writer?
That's very much part of inheritance, but also of loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. A lot of this new book, this new novel, is about how fear takes form, and in a political world, and also in a personal sphere. So within a family and within a country. I think one of the characters says something about how what happens within a family is not necessarily different from a dictatorship running under fear. And because it's also a book about divides and lonelinesses between people and places and genders and races, I was really looking at that empty space and thinking about how it's populated by fear, and also of the dark undercurrent that runs, the political undercurrent that runs, and the currents that run within a family, but also political undercurrents. So the darkness in countries, and the darker history, and you always wonder when it's going to emerge again and who it's going to ensnare. And so I wanted to talk about that fear people have of when it might emerge, of sensing it exists and wondering when it might come into being again. I'm thinking of the United States now and the history of race, and you think once again it's come up when you think of George Floyd, or the fact that so many African Americans are losing their jobs under Trump, or things like that. You think the history is over and you've overcome the history, and then it comes popping up again.
Okay, what do you think? The social media era, does that somehow affected creative thinking, creative discussion, and that kind of discussion among people, among organizations, among group of students, for example? Has it affected it? Everything starts and ends with social media posting, and there is no open discussion. Do you think so?
I'm not the person to ask about social media, because I'm not on social media at all. But I do understand that a lot of these are about how the restrictions on social media in certain countries, it's been, of course, rising. But you will have to ask somebody else about that.
Okay, fine. And what about the reading habits of the youth? What do you think about
the reading habits?
Yes. From the books, it has become to Kindle, and it has become to short notes on shared about books on Instagram, whatever it is. Has the reading habits? Are you seeing a very radical shift in the reading habits of youth?
I'm a bit hopeful. I was talking to a publisher the other day who said that, in fact, there's been a shift back to actual books, to paper books, to not moving away from Kindle. When I'm in book events now, I actually see a lot of young people. I think it's we tend to say young people don't read or their attention span is short, but I think they are passionate audiences still for books. Yeah, I mean, look at my big fat book, and people are reading it, so I'm grateful.
Okay, and this this habit of reading and discussions, let's hope that it will add up our hope for better changes.
Yes, and I can't tell you how many people I've met here in India now on these book tours who belong to book groups. So there seem to be that whole culture of book groups, reading groups, people who are discussing books together, which is lovely. I think the publishing scene in India is growing.
Thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
Thank you.